Hey, 7th grade, Mr. Herzberg here. Today is Friday, yay! And it is April 24th, 2020. We've got a couple things we're going to do today. We've got a chapter of The Pigman to read, chapter 10. We're going to go over the questions from chapter 9 from Wednesday night's homework. And we're going to go over today's journal, so let's get started. Today's journal is a central idea. Remember the reason why an author wrote something, we call that the central idea. Today you're going to read about Joseph Campbell, an American anthropologist and philosopher. And you're going to read about 5 paragraphs about him. And your assignment will be to tell me the main ideas. There's multiple main ideas in this one, not just one. Okay, there's multiple main ideas in the article and how each one is developed. In other words, give me some text evidence to tell me how the author developed each of those central ideas. So remember, the 3 things you want to look at is that the author tried to persuade, inform, or entertain us, okay? More than likely in this case, again, it's to inform us of something. But some of those other 2 might come in too, the entertainment value or the persuasive. And your job will be to decide which of those 3 the author is doing and back it up with text evidence. But he's got multiple central ideas here, okay? So the instructions say identify the main ideas and how each one is developed, okay? Let's go over Wednesday night's homework from chapter 9 of The Pigman. John and Lorraine previously mentioned Norton. Tell me about Norton. Well, Norton is one of the main antagonists of this story. He is constantly testing John and Lorraine, and he's constantly, he's a thief, he shoplifts, he's a prankster, but he's way more aggressive than John. And John says he's scared of him. He's afraid of what this kid will do. And in this chapter, he's really curious about Mr. Pignotti, and the kid, John specifically, is afraid. He wants to go to Mr. Pignotti's house and rob him. Mentioning Norton is an example of foreshadowing what might happen later in the book. So we've learned, remember, foreshadowing is a word that keeps popping up. It means a kind of foreshadowing is an author's way of dropping a hint of something that might come later. So in this chapter 9, they dropped a lot of hints about Norton. My guess is Norton is going to do something later. He's going to make good on one of his threats. What threat does Norton make? He threatens to go later and visit Mr. Pignotti. He says that to John as John's leaving the, calling him Marshmallow Kid, leaving the cemetery. He goes, I might pay that old man a visit. Why does John drink so much? He says he drinks so much because as a kid, when he was like 10 years old, his parents would have parties and have guests over and leave drinks out all over the place, adult beverages. John was a 10-year-old, would go over and get the drinks, drink some, and then act silly. His parents would encourage him to do it. His dad specifically, they'd all laugh. So he started doing it, and now he's got an alcohol problem as a result. How does he feel about his parents, and how does he feel about the Pigman? John does not like his parents very much. He doesn't think they know him really, that they don't actually know the real John Conlon, that they're just completely clueless. Whereas Mr. Pignotti knows him. He is the first adult in John's life that actually takes the time to get to know him. Okay? All right. So chapter 10 is a little bit long. I'm going to read as much of it as I can, but I'm going to give you guys some to finish reading too. And at the very end, there is this sort of what would you do scenario and who's to blame. So we'll talk about that in the Google Meet, but for right now, and I'll give you a question and homework to do if we don't get to this, okay? All right, let's get started. Chapter 10. It got so that every day John and I would go over to the Pigman's, this is Lorraine's chapter by the way, go over to the Pigman's house after school and have a glass of wine and some conversation. It was routine by the time Christmas came around, and it was so nice to have someplace to go besides the cemetery when it was cold outside. Masterson's tomb is an escapist dream in the summer, but it's a nightmare in December. Where have you been? I told you the Latin club was meeting today, Mom, and then I missed the bus coming home. I went right to my room and took off my coat. Did I see you in a car today, Lorraine? My mother asked, coming to the doorway to watch my reaction. You know, I was waiting for you to go to the store today. When you didn't come home, I walked down myself and I saw a girl in a car that looked just like you. She was holding the large coffee cup and stirring nervously. It wasn't me, Mom. I didn't think it was. You know very well what I'd do if I ever caught you in a car. Yeah, I do, Mother. I understand. Now be a good girl, and I need you to iron my uniform, will you? I came home late last night, she went on, following me into the kitchen, and the girl down the street was in a car, necking like a sled. Maybe that's her fiancé, Mom. I don't care if it is. Just don't let me ever catch you in a car if you know what's good for you. I got some shrimp chop suey from the Chinese restaurant. I saved yours. But, why don't you get the uniform done first? She always warns me about getting into cars and things like that. When she goes to work in the night shift, she constantly reminds me to lock the doors and windows. And sometimes she calls on the phone if she gets a chance and tells me again. Beware of men is what she's really trying to say. They have dirty minds and they're only after one thing. Rapists are roaming the earth, according to my mother. But now I understand a little, I guess. I think the only man she really hates is my father. Even though he's dead, I don't think she'll ever be able to forgive what he did to her. She used to pull me through the story at least twice a year. How when she was pregnant with me, her doctor told her, and told my father, that there's some kind of disease that my father had, and she wouldn't let me touch her until she got rid of it. It turned out that, well, he actually had a girlfriend on the side, and that's when she filed for a legal separation. Everyone was surprised because they had been childhood sweethearts, and the expression goes, it must have been awful for her when she got found out about it. She never talks about my dad anymore, just how awful men are in general, she does. She's what the psychologists call fixated on the subject of men. There's one picture of my mother and father in an album, which is how I like to try and remember them. He's wearing a football uniform, a handsome young man, with his arm around her, and she's wearing one of those funny raccoon coats. They're smiling at one another in a grass field somewhere in Stapleton. You know, I got a run in one of those new stockings last night, Lorraine. I didn't notice it until I started washing them this morning. I could tell from the way she spoke that it was her way of thanking me for giving them to her. Where did you get the money to buy those at, Lorraine? I told you, Mom. Why don't you tell me again? I walked to school a few days ago instead of taking the bus. But you said you skipped lunch. And I skipped lunch a couple of times. She mulled that over for a few seconds, but she had to get to work on time and couldn't devote her full energy to interrogating me. She always makes me tell the same story over a week or so later to see if I slip up on any of the details. When I give you money for the bus, Lorraine, you ride the bus. It just doesn't look right for a girl your age to be walking alone on the streets. Yes, Mother. It looks like you're trying to get picked up, okay? So all things considered, it was wonderful getting over to Mr. Pignati's for a little dash of wine every day. Oh, no, guys, please don't bring anything, the Pigman would always plead. Just let me know what you want and I'll get anything for you. I was surprised to see John break down and start buying his own 6-packs of beer. I really was. I mean, I had been bringing things like chips and pretzels and all along simply because I felt funny mooching off Mr. Pignati. We want to bring our own stuff from now on, okay, Mr. Pignati? Yeah, whenever we can, John would add. So things were really going along fine until one Sunday night in January there was a snowstorm, and Mr. Pignati had been to the zoo. John and I got to his house around 8 or so, and we were all set to watch a TV show when we noticed Mr. Pignati was really sad. I don't even want to tell you this part, but one of us has to. It's very depressing and still really is. The minute we walked in the house, I knew there was something wrong. He looked sick, just worn out and sick. Even though he was trying to smile, you could tell there was something off. I told him to stay in his chair and I'd get our drinks, and he looked rather grateful for my offer. Bobo wouldn't eat today, he said, forcing a weak smile. I offered him a chocolate bar, and he just let it drop outside his cage. I went to the kitchen and left John and the Pigman watching TV. The theme of the show was Hooray for Hollywood. Everybody was in it, so I knew it was going to be a strenuous bore. I guess Bobo's just getting old, I heard Mr. Pignati say as I served him a drink. John had a can of beer, and I just didn't feel like anything at that moment. Who? John asked, not moving his eye from the TV screen. Bobo. I sat in a chair near the window, and I could feel a terrible draft. Outside, the snow was falling, and it looked pretty. There was a lot of pine trees, and the snow was sticking to them. It dawned on me that what a strain it must have been on Mr. Pignotti to have trudged all the way down to see that old baboon. He had even shoveled the walk outside, which I knew was for us, and at that moment, for no reason at all, I remembered the old lady at the Chambers Street yelling out, "Death is coming." "Anybody hungry?" I asked, going into the kitchen, again waiting for an answer. I came back with some candy on a plate. All I wanted to do was cheer everyone up. The TV was doing the best it could, with a blonde starlet singing "Hooray for Hollywood" as 200 chorus boys lifted her in the air. "You want a piece of candy?" I asked, offering the plate to John. He was so hypnotized by the starlet, he simply reached over, grabbed a piece, and stuck it in his mouth without even looking. Then a comedian finally told a joke we all laughed at. "John, I think it's right now is a good time." I got up, turned the TV down, and I waited for John to start. He looked nervous over what we had decided to tell Mr. Pignotti. "Mr. Pignotti." "Yes?" "Well, Mr. Pignotti, there's something Lorraine and we think we should really tell you." Mr. Pignotti looked very serious and worried. Just tell him, John." "Well, Mr. Pignotti," John took a big puff on his cigarette. "Lorraine and I have something on our consciences that you really ought to know about." "Will you just tell him, John?" He took another puff on his cigarette. "Well, you've really been so nice to us that we want to come clean and just be honest with you." "Yes?" Mr. Pignotti said, sitting forward in his chair. "You see, Mr. Pignotti, we're not really working for a charity." He just stared at us. We're just high school kids." John added a little nervously. We're sorry we lied to you." The Pigman looked so sad, and it didn't seem like it was just because of our confession. It looked like there was so much more going on in his mind. Just because of our confession, it looked like something else. I couldn't keep from speaking. It was just a silly game, trying to push things to a lighter level. We weren't trying to be mean. "No," John spoke up. "Let's be honest with him, Lorraine. We had to be honest with you because we like you more than anyone probably we know." Finally, we had to stop talking and wait for a response from him. He turned his head away and seemed to be looking out the window. Perhaps John had been right when he said he should have forgotten the whole thing and never mentioned it. Maybe there are some lies you should never admit to. I had told him we had to be truthful, and now I was sorry because I think I knew before the Pigman opened his mouth what we had to tell us in return. "You know, she used to keep the house so clean," Mr. Pignotti muttered, lowering his head. I squirmed slightly. "Who?" "My wife, Conchetta." John looked at me and I looked at him. It was the first time the Pigman had mentioned her in months. "I had them make a cake." "Pardon me, Mr. Pignotti? A cake?" "I had them make a cake at the bakery for one of our anniversaries." He wiped his eyes with a wrinkled handkerchief, took it out of his pocket. "Something like our wedding cake was with a girl that was all in white on top, and a boy." I held my breath. She loved me," he said. He looked so tired. We loved each other. We didn't need anyone else. She did everything for me. We were each other's entire life." He managed to say and then broke into sobs. He tried to cover his eyes, turned his head so we wouldn't have to see him like that. I couldn't help thinking about my mother and father. Mr. Pignotti he knew something about love and having fun, and other people didn't. I guess Conchetta had known the secret too. Mr. Pignotti raised his head and looked at us. Tears were pouring down his face. John pretended not to notice by watching the television, but I knew he really wasn't. He may have been thinking about his parents too. I went over and put my hand on Mr. Pignotti's. There was nothing else I could think of doing. "Tell us," I wanted to tell him. "Tell us if it'll make you feel better." "She's dead." He wiped tears with the large white handkerchief. There was a pause, and then John turned to the Pigman. "We're so sorry," he said in such a gentle way. I wanted to kiss him for that. There was no need to say anything more. Hurrah for Hollywood was blasting on the TV now, but now there were 2,000 chorus boys singing The Blonde into the air. I tried to think of something else to say. "Have another piece of candy, John." Without looking at the pigman or me, he reached over and took it. What kind of candy is this? Chocolate-covered ants? You never saw anybody run faster for the kitchen sink in your life, and at last there was a laugh out of Mr. Pignotti. I was so relieved he had laughed that I'd even eaten snails or anything else. Ants were nothing. Even the pigman and I tried one of the chocolates, which tasted like crispy rice. You louse, I heard call from the kitchen, as a square of ant into my mouth. They were all really tasty, in my opinion. John took extra long coming back, and I could hear him getting roller skates out of the closet in the back room, where all the pigs were. I knew they'd have something to try on, a little joke. So we all came flying into the living room on his roller skates. I laughed it up so he'd feel a little better about slipping in the insects. Then the pigman wanted to get on the act. That's how the three of us were. If one did something funny, the other had to come up with something too. 3 copycats. It wasn't exactly what the show-off is wanted to entertain each other. We wanted to show equally how much we were thankful for each other's company. Well, the pigman passed out the pencils and paper, so I knew I was going to one of those games and how to memorize 10 items. Number 1 to 5, the pigman started getting a little bit of the old gleam back. This is going to tell you what kind of person you are. He drew out a diagram on a piece of paper and laid it in front of us. I thought he had completely flipped his lid. I'm going to tell you a murder story, and your job is to listen. When he drew the skull and wrote assassin, John perked up a little. There was a river with a bridge over it, with a wife and a husband. They live in a house on one side of the river. The wife has a lover on the other side of the river, and the only way to get from the other side of the river on the other is to walk across the bridge or to ask the boatman to take you. One day the husband told his wife he had to be gone all night to handle business in a faraway town. The wife pleaded with him to take her because she knows if he doesn't, she will be unfaithful to him. The husband absolutely refuses to take her because she will only be in the way of his important business. So the husband goes alone. When he is gone, the wife goes over to the bridge, stays with the lover, and the night passes and the dawn is almost up when the wife leaves because she must go back to her own house before the husband gets home. She starts to cross the bridge, but there's an assassin there waiting on the other side. And she knows if she tries to cross, he will murder her. In terror, she runs up the side of the river and asks the boatman to take her across the river. But he wants 50 cents. She has no money, so he refuses to take her. The wife runs back to the lover's house and explains to him what a predicament she's in, and asks him for 50 cents to pay the boatman. The lover refuses, and tells her that it's her own fault for getting into this mess. As dawn comes, the wife is nearly out of her mind and decides to dash across the bridge. When she comes face to face with the assassin, he takes out a large knife and stabs her until she's dead. So what's this for? John asked. Now, I want you to write down on paper. I gave you the names of the characters in order of which you think they were most responsible for the wife's death. Just list wife, husband, lover, assassin, and boatman in the order you think they are most guilty. Mr. Pignotti had explained the whole story over to me again because it was too complicated to get the first time. But I ended up listing the guilty in this order. So here's the picture. So I want you guys to do this too on the homework tonight. And then I'll tell you what all this means. So I'm going to stop there. If you guys have any questions, let me know. See you at the Google Chat tomorrow from 1:30 to 2. Have a good day, y'all.